G'day Internet. We're here at the Purpose Built Moto garage and I'm going to be mentioning a few words that we don't normally say in this garage: electric and supermoto. We've got a late model Zero FX here. We've been given it by the guys at Australian Electric Motor Co. to give a makeover, so we've released it under our joint venture, Grid Cycles. I'm about to take you through what we've done to this thing to completely transform it from a very tired and sort of raggy looking adventure slash commuter into this sharp looking supermoto. Now, working on a late model bike like this is a bit of a luxury for us. Normally we have old stuff pushed in here that's been poorly repaired, poorly maintained, fixed by that guy that your uncle knew, sort of, that was one time a mechanic, and they've done it poorly. So usually we're working on top of old stuff. With this bike, we started with a very clean slate. We didn't have to worry about any performance mods or anything like that. And before we got into the creative work, all we had to do was pretty much tear down the old plastics and start with the wheels, chassis, and suspension. So we'll show you a little screen grab of what the Zero FX looks like standard. And you'll notice that the fenders are really long. It's sort of out of proportion a little bit to how you would generally see a supermoto presented. Everything was a little too high, which is a weird thing that we found. I sort of couldn't quite pick exactly what was wrong with this bike. Well, not wrong, it's just what I didn't like about it. And come to it, eventually I figured out that the fenders and the radiator shrouds and everything were just sort of 150 mil higher than what you would normally have. So what we did when we started this bike after teardown was take a few points on where our sharp edges should finish. So things like the points on the radiator shrouds, where the height of the rear fender should be. And that sort of set our sort of like datum points for us to custom build this body. So everything that you see on this bike that's been painted white, gray, or blue is completely handmade in-house here. And this is the first bike that we've ever done like that, where we've completely handmade all the sheet metal work from scratch. So the first piece that was built on this bike after teardown was the front fender. I was on a much needed break in South Africa with some mates, so I left this as one of the jobs that Dylan took care of while I was away. He's shaped up this really nice, short, stumpy Motard fender. Like I said before, this is all hand-shaped aluminium. So he's sort of set the tone for this project with this front fender. We sort of workshopped a few ideas in making it sort of like nice and broad and to sit just up under the bottom triple clamp, but also have like a good bit of shape to it too. Now, once he was finished with that front fender, I've started to shape up this headlight nacelle and number plate. So we had to fit some legal lights on here. I would have loved to just make a straight race plate. It would have looked really trick, but you got to play the game with the police sometimes and make sure you're not going to get pulled over every time you go for a ride. So this thing was set up with one of our 5 3/4 inch classic LED headlights. So we've mounted that in there, and you've got sort of a pivot point for adjustment. It fits nice and close onto your forks. And as far as having a legal headlight on a supermoto goes, this is about as nice as we could figure out how to make it. So with these two pieces done, I moved on to the tail, and then this bike really started to take shape. So apart from the bodywork and the lighting on this bike, one of the only mods that we had to do when it came to the frame layout and stuff was where the seat mounted. So the seat mount is generally about 40 or 50 millimeters higher. So from the tank line, the tail is actually higher than your top triple clamp. So that was one of the things that we identified early on that just didn't fit with that sort of Motard style set. So we've gone and fixed that. We've actually been able to reuse the factory seat pan and just mount that a bit lower. So we've remade the mounts there, and then that set our height for where the rear fender would start to be shaped. I started with a few pieces of cardboard and did a few mock-ups here, and then I started shaping this fender. So the idea with it was to make everything nice and compact, still give that really like dirt bike style line over the bike, and also have a mount for our rear tail light. So we've used a 3-in-1 hollow tip LED on the rear here. So this is brake light, tail light, and indicator all in one. So we've used a set of those, and using that allows us to keep the tail fender nearly completely clean. The only other thing that we had to do on the rear of the bike here was a swing arm mounted number plate mount. So this is just shaped out of some 13mm chromoly bar using one of our number plate tail tidy kits, I guess. So they come with a stainless steel plate mount and your LED number plate light. Run that internally and down through that, so your wiring follows the brake hose up, keeping everything nice and crispy clean. And then looking at the top line of this bike, it just looks like a dirt bike. You don't have any plates, mess, or anything like that here. So with this fender, I took my time shaping it, putting the lines that I wanted into it. And when it came to it, I just wasn't quite happy with it. So what I did was unbolt it, ended up putting a crease down the center line here. So this was all nice and smooth. And it just didn't have enough detail on it. It looked a little bit bland, a little bit flat. So I took it off, actually put it in my finger brake and just put a crease in it and then shaped that out with a hammer and dolly, and it came up really nice. This is probably one of my favorite pieces on the bike, just because of well, I know how long it took me to make and how complex it was for me to wrap my head around, but the simple look of it is something that I really like. With that finish, I moved on to the rear side covers and then the radiator shroud. So we'll run you through details on that now. So when it comes to completely recreating the bodywork on a bike, it's a really fun process because you don't really have anything to deal with other than the shape of the motorcycle itself underneath. So I wanted to try to tie in a few of the design elements that we used from front to back. And this little, this sort of little mounting point, I guess you would call it, on the rear shroud is something that's been repeated both here and on the radiator shroud. Stuff like that, I feel like when you can work it in and it works and flows naturally, it gives an element of, it makes the design feel a little bit more complete and considered. So these are a relatively simple sort of thing. We picked up on a few frame mounts here. These two bolts on either side hold both your seat and the second mount for the rear fender, and then underneath the seat we've got a little glove box or tool pouch, I guess, if you want, as well, that we built in, because once we pulled the body kit off there's actually quite a bit of room under here, so a little bit of under seat storage. And then this was just a matter of template. There's a bit of shape put into these with an English wheel, and then folding these edges over, shrinking that edge around to get that nice finish behind the hollow tip light there, and mounting it up. And with this tail section complete and the front fender that Dylan had made, it was time to tackle the radiator shrouds. And because we had these two sort of, you had the top and the tail of the bike finished, it was almost, it was obvious that what these needed to look like for us. So that was, the process of design on that went really quickly, but the process of actually making that happen was, a very, very time intensive. So as I was shaping these shrouds up, I laid them out and, as always, sort of get my paper template down, and then I can lay that on a flat sheet of aluminium and cut out my two templates. What I did on this one though, because I wasn't 100% sure whether it was going to work out, was I kept my template aside and just cut the first one, and I pretty much had this side completely finished before I tackled the other. I think probably the most challenging thing for me is to, when you're making this stuff, making it look alright is easy. That last 20% in the fine finish is super tough. And then also you got to recreate that, but a mirror image of it. So everything's the opposite way around on the other side. So symmetry is another thing that I sort of struggle with. And I mean, it's just, you just got to put heaps of time in it. And also when it comes to that fine finish, Dylan has a really fine hand and eye. So he helped me out a lot with sort of like finishing those finer touches, and I can get the shape into it and stuff like that and have it fit up, but getting these sort of like fine lines and removing a lot of the hammer dents and stuff, Dylan jumped in and gave me a hand while I was on another project. So this is all shaped out of 2mm aluminium here. We've had probably, I think there's 3 pieces total in this radiator shroud. So there was a cut here and a weld for this back section. So they basically mount here. And then there's a couple of mounting points on the tank that we picked up from the factory radiator shrouds. I don't know, well, I'm calling them radiator shrouds, but that's just what they are on a normal dirt bike. They're just sort of like detail pieces on this thing. There's no radiator. But so we've got a cut here, and that's actually been strengthened because there was a fair bit of flex in it just with 2mm. So that's been double backed, and it's like a 4mm piece now because it's sort of like a nice long skinny run there. So we have that, our mounting points here. And then we've actually been able to utilize like the factory plastic inner shrouds, trim those back up because the other ones are quite long too. So that's all been shaped up. And then we've just hand fabricated this sort of aluminium mount here that still allows access to your charging port, which is under the right-hand side, just up underneath this radiator shroud. So apart from the obvious aesthetic changes to the bike, I'll take you through a few of the things we've changed in terms of how this thing rides. So while we weren't able to sort of like get in and rebuild the engine and that sort of stuff to get more power out of this thing, what we have done is try to improve the ride for someone that likes to ride like I do. So I sort of like a low set of bars on a street bike. So we've modified the stock bar clamps and lowered those about 30 or 40 mil. They are quite high as they come out. We've also removed the factory speedo and put it back on the tank to keep that front section nice and clean. The other things that we've done on the seat, there's always like a bit of a dip through that middle section. And while it doesn't look good, it actually doesn't feel real great because it feels a lot more relaxed when you're riding it. So when I'm on a supermoto, I want to feel like an intensity in the ride. I want to feel over the bike and like I'm in control and I have freedom to move around. I don't want to be locked into a sort of saddle style seat. So we've shaped this up to mimic a dirt bike seat. We've actually thinned out this rear section quite a lot. We've probably taken maybe 30 mil off either side of this seat here. And then we've also thinned out this front section quite a bit too. So the factory radiator shrouds sort of splay out a lot more. We've sucked that right in. So when you're sitting on this thing, you can really grip into it with your legs. And while this bike, hasn't been souped up, as they come from the factory floor, they are a really nice, quick bike. But if you're thrashing the ass off it, it runs out of battery quick. So you're gonna have a good time, not for a long time. It's just the way the electric bikes are. Last thing on the Zero Supermoto before we get out for a test ride is the color scheme. Now, as this thing was sitting on my bench in raw metal, I wanted to make something that was sort of futuristic and sort of gave it that Motard vibe that we were chasing. So I sort of dived in and, I am a fan of the Supermoto guys when they have these gnarly sticker kits and all that sort of stuff. Definitely not my style, but I do appreciate that sort of like bright pop color. So I wanted to blend a bit of what we would usually do with a little bit of that world as well. And what we landed on was this really nice light Porsche bone gray with a fluoro blue and then white color scheme. So Justin from Pop Bang Classics knocked this one out of the park. He got it done super quick for me too, which I was really grateful for because we had to take this thing down to be on show at Throttle Roll. So as always, I gave him a few sketches, drew a few lines on the bike and then let him have at it. He actually came up with this really cool idea to finish the fluoro blue pinstripes in sort of like a staggered cut shape. I don't know what you even call that, but it's an awesome job. I really love it. The client is ultra happy with how this bike turned out. I can't wait to see his reaction when we give it to him for a ride too. Probably the most supermoto part of this whole bike, apart from the custom body kit that we've done, is the wheels. So we've taken the factory Zero wheels, given them a coat of super high gloss black, and then put a bit of that fluoro blue pop color on it. And when this thing is burning down the road, it looks absolutely mean. Now there's no real point in me starting up the Zero Supermoto for you guys anyway, because you can't hear a damn thing. You're just gonna have to be comfortable with the GoPro test ride footage and seeing me enjoy the hell out of this bike. Super light, really nice, fun machine. Probably be the ultimate thing to get around town on. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, guys. And if you want more excruciating detail than what we've gone through in this clip, make sure you jump onto the Purpose Built Moto website. We've got a whole build blog and all the details on this project there. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.